Good morning. This is Kenneth and Heather with the Advancing Equity Coalition, here to give you our take on what went down last night during the MPS board meeting. And man, was it a juicy one. Heather, how are you doing today?
I'm still processing a lot of the meeting. I keep finding my brain like thinking like, what was that about?
Yeah, it was a lot. And, there was just, as I reflect on it, and we do this thing where it's fun for us and it's a way to like kind of break down the meeting and, reflect. But, um, with a do better moment and the most valuable moment during our recap, but there were a lot of lows, I gotta say. And that's unfortunate because I think there are some things that were good about it. And I think there are things that people will point to that were bad that actually still need to kind of carry over. But, anyways, we'll get into that. But, Heather, what struck you the most from last night's board meeting?
You know, I mean, I think we're kind of alluding to it, but there was a real shift in tone, right? So one of the things that we wondered about
Yeah.
was with such a close vote on the superintendent and giving him another with that 5-4, right? Where it was like this was really close. We wondered if this was an indicator that this would be now a split board. And I think what we saw last night was that a lot of this board does feel very there's tension. There's more tension in the room than we've seen before, and I think this vote had a big impact
Yeah.
on this board.
Yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily think there's more tension. There's more tension in the room than some of the most like heated
That's true.
CDD conversations,
Oh,
even
right.
amongst the board, like amongst the board and their back and forth. Um, but this was definitely the most tense it's been in the boardroom or virtually, I guess, with this current board with Director Cerrillo, Director Elamine, um, joining the board. And so I do think that that is something to, yeah, keep an eye on because, this board is, um, there's some very new people on the board. There's some people that have been on the board for 10 years and also obviously everybody in the middle. Um, but yeah, what's really struck me is like it started from the beginning. Like there was a tone and a like intensity from the moment that we walked in. And again, I said this during our recap. I provided public comment virtually because by the time I tried to sign up to do public comment, all the spots were gone. And so that's usually a good indicator that something's going on. And so I walked in during my own public comment, actually, like my voice was just playing, and I thought that was uncomfortable and weird. But then like, all the people did their public comment, and that was fine. The room was full. But then some of the people that provided public comment, some of the educators that provided public comment about what's going on at Northeast, like I thought that started the meeting off on a really tense and kind of gross foot. And the way that, and you alluded to this and you already talked about this, the way that they're talking about students and like the atmosphere in their buildings. And it just felt like they carried that negativity into the boardroom. And then like that was how the meeting started. And then that was how the meeting continued. And then that was how the meeting ended. So yeah, what do you think about that?
I mean, I think there's like so some of the things that I did like was that I felt this was a board who was willing to ask harder questions than I've seen. I do think that either in the I do think that in the past or like with since we've been watching this particular board, some of the questions have either been a little bit of not so challenging, where I would have liked to have been able to see them ask harder questions, or if they weren't answered directly, then the board would just say like, okay, thank you. I noticed last night was like hard question, more honest conversations, a little more like, wait, is that actually an answer? Right? A little more of that kind of a mindset from the board. And so in that respect, like tension isn't always negative. I know it can feel, like sometimes like there were moments where you were like, wait, we were just like, what's happening, right? But I also think like I think the tension that we're talking about in this room, I mean, like our schools are in a tense place, and
Yep.
I was thinking about this, about how um, the teachers in the room kept talking about how they'd been at the school for this many years and this was the worst year. And I was thinking, like, yeah, but also, like, this group of students has lived through some things. And so we need to show up. We can't show up for this kids like the same 31 years we've taught them before. This group of students can't have that. And so I think this story that, like, I've been doing it all this great, this long, and this, all, I think some of the tension needs to come to the surface. Um, you know,
Yeah,
but what,
and clearly, and we're hosting an event. Sign up next week around our public safety panel. Um, but I think the thing that I want to make sure everyone knows in terms of like how we feel, and as we go forward with this event, and but also as we like think about like the culture and environment of our students and how to respond to what's happened over the last 18 months, is like our students, like let's not over prescribe them with something that's wrong with them, right?
yes,
Like let's
yes,
not say that, like, oh, the pandemic happened, the uprising happened, and now there's something wrong with them, and like we need to fix it. Like I think we need to figure out like how are we actually responding and changing and growing as a school community, as a classroom, as a district, to our reality, which is like our students experience something. They're not going to be quiet about it. They feel like they need to be heard and they should be seen. And
yep,
like those aren't things that are wrong to be asked for. Now, some of the ways that that's showing up and coming out aren't the ways that we all, especially as adults, would like that to be. But like, how is a school environment? I just think what was really frustrating to me, specifically about the educators, and like I said earlier in our video, is that I just didn't like that they were saying that as if there's nothing that they could have done or could have done differently to create a better environment for students to like push boundaries, to like explore what they're feeling, all of that stuff. And I'm not saying that's easy. I know that's much easier said than done, but it just felt like we're kicking the can down the road. Now, for the board members, I think that they actually went through something that they had never gone through for the first time, which was a 5-4 vote. And it just happened to be about one of the most important things that that they've ever done, right? Especially as those 9, which is to extend the superintendent's contract. And I don't think they've explored how they're really feeling about that, and like how does that change their own dynamics. And they're trying to pretend like everything's still kind of the same, but clearly we learned last night it is not the same. And to your point, like I think that's okay. I think it's okay that we sit in some tension and we have disagreements. And, I think that it's okay. I think it's productive to a point. Like, I think it's productive that we're asking challenging questions of each other as board members. And I
mm-hmm,
think it's productive that you're like challenging and questioning things that you are that are being presented to you from the school
mm-hmm,
board.
mm-hmm,
What isn't productive, and what the moments of um, tension that we felt, is when it felt like board members were dismissing each other, disrespecting each other. And as much as board members would say, no, that didn't happen, it happened. Like, if you want to go watch the recording, we're not going to like call out who, what, when, how, but like it was kind of apparent throughout the meeting. Like people were just like disrespecting each other. We know Director Cerrillo specifically said that she felt disrespected at some point during the meeting. And so, yeah, I think that the tone shift um, is definitely a result of the 5-4 board. And I think the question is like, how do they move forward together? Because they at least have another year together, and a very pivotal year as you're going into a lot of important conversations. But yeah, this was really a really different tone for sure.
Well, one of the things, I'm glad you talked about Director Surreal. I guess I wanted to just talk too about, so let's talk a little bit about like where one part of this conversation took us and where things got dicey, right?
Yeah.
So we know that we're talking about language, we're talking about the vision and the mission that are going to guide the strategic plan for the district for the next 4 to 5 years. And you were at the retreat and I wasn't, the board retreat, right, back in August. But we know that Director Cirio has commented more than one occasion some concerns or some things that she wanted to change.
Yeah.
And so let's just talk a little bit about that. Like what did she want? Why did she want it?
Yeah, so I think what's also important is like it's been Director Cirio and Director Elamine who have both had concerns with the term well-rounded in the vision of the strategic plan. And from the beginning, and actually maybe Director Elamine might have said it first. I don't want to say who said it first. They both said it at the retreat though. They both said, the term well-rounded, we don't like it. We don't like that term. Director Cirio has been consistent. She said, this does not translate into anything in Spanish. This, like, well-rounded doesn't make sense for us. Director Elamine has said, well-rounded has not worked for Black and Brown students. Like, why are we committing to this term well-rounded? I'd like to pick something different. The board's like, okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, they do this thing where like, I hear you saying, and then they like, they tried to wrap up everyone's comments, but they like clearly dismiss some folks' comments. And then they move on to the next meeting. The next meeting, Director Cirio, Director Elamine say like, hey, don't like well-rounded, would like to see something different. Please do something different. Okay. They're like, yeah, I totally hear you. We're going to change it. We'll add the word anti-racist in there. And so last night we hear for the third time, well-rounded, still in there. Anti-racist, added after one request by a white male board member. And then it was like, okay, Director Cirio and Director Elamine had it. Like, and again, this was after the 5-4 vote this for the first time. And they're like, look, well-rounded does not mean anything in Spanish. It doesn't mean, and then Director Ali confirmed it doesn't mean or translate into anything significant in Somali. We didn't hear about Hmong specifically. And then also Director Elamine said, yeah, and I still don't like this language because Black and Brown students are not benefiting from us saying we're going to provide a well-rounded education. And I know I've been going on about this to tell this story, but the thing that breaks my heart is like, again, we in our progressive spaces, we say all the right things like, oh, we want to, make sure that people's voices are heard and blah, 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 blah. And then when it gets to schools, we can't figure out why students and families don't feel heard and seen and what's going on in buildings. Like, this is the exact thing that happens to families. They provide a concern to a school. They say, hey, I have this concern. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, we'll fix it. A month later, not fixed. Problem comes back. Oh my gosh, yes, of course, we'll fix it. Not fixed. A month later, problem comes back. Oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. What would you suggest we do? And that's what happened last night. Director Caprini told exactly right. Director Cirio, what word would you suggest? Like, you suggest a word then, because clearly she was really frustrated. And like, I don't know. It's just like very frustrating because they've been fighting against this word well-rounded. Clearly the rest of the board didn't care or didn't agree with them. They were fine moving forward and they keep bringing this issue up. Finally, it came to a head. Of course, Director Cirio had to get visibly frustrated in order for that. And then all of a sudden she looks like she's aggressive or she looks like she's so emotional or whatever. And it's just like,
we're not being cooperative by having the word ready. Like, that was never expressed, right?
And it's just like very frustrating because like this is the pattern that they say we're trying to fight against, and then it just like replicates itself in our leadership. So of course it's going to replicate itself in our classrooms. So yeah, the conversation around well-rounded so challenging. And I'll say this: well-rounded, like what they try to do for well-rounded is they try to define it. That was their next, like they tried to define it in this really long way. And then all the board members were like, no, we don't like the long version of it. And I was like, okay, well, this is a challenge then.
Well, and I also think, I think a couple things. I think it's really hard to hold someone accountable for the words well-rounded because then we can always, so when a child can't read, write, or do math at grade level, right? We can just be like, well, but other parts are so great. And so if you say high, if you say like high quality or excellent or, I mean, if, like a couple of the other words that were bounced around, all of a sudden there's a standard there that families can come in and say, you're not doing this. But, and I think that's like the part of it, because I think, you know, we don't really want that standard so clear so that we can hold people accountable.
And the thing that I think is really interesting about Well-Rounded as well, in my reflection, is like I saw Well-Rounded kind of become a thing when like especially white wealthy moms were coming and saying like, oh my gosh, like how could you test my children? Like, what about the arts? They're so important. What about music? They're so important. You're just drilling in on math and literacy. And so they created this term well-rounded to accommodate and satiate this concern and this demand. And then last night, Director Cerrillo was like saying, this doesn't translate into Spanish. This doesn't translate into, because we created this term that actually means nothing, but it was just something to satiate white progressives, essentially. Like this is what it is. And so we created terms, we created things, and now we're saying like, oh no, the word, this like word that you're trying to use to replace it doesn't fit, or this doesn't work. And so then when we set like, yeah, let's set a standard. Like, let's just say we're going to provide an excellent education, and that it can include, music, technology, arts, whatever, history. I don't know. But that was our analysis. It was a fiery board meeting. Clearly, we're fired up about it. When aren't we? But it is what it is. But thanks for doing this recap with me, Heather.
Okay, talk to you soon.
Bye.